I, Mug Club, am leaving the Blaze. This is a long time coming, obviously, and I had been hoping that this would be, of course, a joint statement. I've lost sleep over this for months because I knew that I wouldn't be renewing, and of course the Blaze knew that I wouldn't be renewing, but I have no way of reaching you. I'm precluded from being able to reach you, and that's why if you go in and enter your email so we don't lose touch with you at mugclubforever.com, we can enter that in there, and every time I mention it to him, I just bring it up.
This is I Don't Speak German.
That's why.
I'm Jack Graham, he, him, and in this podcast I talk to my friend Daniel Harper, also he, him, who spent years tracking the far right in their safe spaces. In this show we talk about them and about the wider reactionary forces feeding them and feeding off them. Be warned, this is difficult subject matter. Content warnings always apply. And welcome back, listeners, to IDSG, the podcast that doesn't cover up sexual abuse in the atheist community.
The only one, yes.
As usual, I'm Jack, your co-host and gubernatorial comptroller of the podcast. But I'm here with Daniel, who is the actual talent. Daniel, be talented for us.
I thought I already had been, so I don't know. I'm here.
Yeah.
Here we go. Yeah.
That's right. All he has to do is show up.
Yeah, all I do is show up with the clips. That's all I do.
Yeah. And the product of a huge amount of work. I mean, it's been a while, but it's really nice to be back with you, listeners. As you know, as the proper team, it's really nice to be back to you and me talking, Daniel. I mean, we've had some. Well, I've been privileged to play host to some wonderful guests recently, but still, this is the way it should be.
Yeah, no, and I do appreciate the listeners for putting up with my absence because I was doing some other stuff and sort of working on some projects, and I do have quite a few episodes in partial prep. I've been doing a lot of different things. I just needed to take a break from recording for a little bit, but we're back, and hopefully we'll finish out February with some banger episodes, and then move right into March and do more banger episodes. By which I mean it's all good. It's all mashed potatoes from here. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
by banger. Yeah,
and gravy. Okay. So what's this episode about? Tell us what it's about.
So we're going to be talking about the context of the sort of the Steven Crowder Daily Wire drama and sort of the and the larger ecosystem which surrounds that. Although I think in this episode we're mostly going to kind of be covering some of the drama and sort of kind of what happened, and then the next episode, I think this will end up being a two-parter based on the number of clips I have. It's definitely going to be a two-parter. The second part will be more of that context, but I think I never want this show to be let's just cover the news. And this is kind of old news at this point. It has been a while. Yeah. I've been prepping this for a while. And I think
people don't come to us for the gossip hot off the presses,
Right. I think there's a lot here that I'm going to be able to offer that has not been put together. So hopefully people will appreciate this, but I have put a lot of work into following this fucking drama. And kind of dealing with that stuff. So and I know we also have some predecessor business to do, and so we'll I guess we'll start there.
Yeah, we have some Jimmy Dore news. I'm sorry to have to tell you all. I raised the possibility of talking a little bit about this at the start of this episode, and Daniel pointed out to me that it's actually quite apt for what we're going to be talking about in the episode proper. So I just wanted to, in case you hadn't already seen it, listeners, and in case you're interested, as I am for some reason, in Mr. Dore, I wanted to drag your attention to an article at a site called Important Context by Walker Bragman. And I think really the best thing I can do is just read some bits of the article. I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible, but it'll become clear why I'm doing that. So I'm quoting now. An independent contractor agreement, which was used by Door's production company, Four Door Productions, in the summer of 2020, contains several harsh provisions that disadvantage workers. The document contains a thorough 9-part, 3-page-long confidentiality section, effectively prohibiting contractors from discussing anything they learned about Door, his wife, or their collaborators on the job, including details about their business, personal lives, finances, investments, and more. In the past, Door criticized former President Trump's use of confidentiality agreements with volunteers, calling them right-wing. The consequences for workers who breach Door's confidentiality section or another section requiring contractors to sign away rights to their work product can be severe under the agreement. Breaches and even threatened breaches constitute, quote, immediate and irreparable harm, unquote, entitling Door's company to equitable non-monetary relief, meaning contractors could be ordered to refrain from the activity. The agreement further stipulates that breaches entitle Door's company to liquidated damages, which are agreed upon damages for failing to meet a specific contractual obligation in the amount of $10,000 per breach. The 4DP contractor agreement includes forced arbitration for disputes, except in certain circumstances like union busting. In arbitration, parties submit disputes and claims to a chosen arbitrator, in this case, one affiliated with the American Arbitration Association, rather than going through the courts. Arbitrators are notoriously pro-employer. Arbitration can also be expensive. It deprives workers of their ability to be heard by a jury. The 4DP contract spells this out explicitly. Once a decision has been rendered by an arbitrator, workers have little recourse. As the National Association of Consumer Advocates warns, arbitrators aren't required to take the law and legal precedent into account. There is no appeal or public review of decisions. That's the end of the quotes from that article. And yeah, hero of the working man, Mr. James Door, for everybody.
I mean, there was a Supreme Court case, which I will put a link to the 5-4 pod episode about the Supreme Court case, because I would not do it justice, particularly not having like kind of re-listened to it lately or read the case or anything. But effectively, if you sign on to if you work for Walmart, which one of my first jobs was working at Walmart, by the way. So but if you work at Walmart, then you essentially, they push all the anti-union thing that they could possibly push on you. It is literally from not even your interview, but from the pre-interview. You are kind of given anti-union propaganda. And when I was like 17 and got that first job, you're not thinking, at least in the United States, like it's just not part of your like consciousness unless you're working within particular industries that unionization is a thing. It's just like, oh, well, we're a family here, and so of course we don't sue each other. We don't need a union because we're treated well. That's just the thing that happens if you work retail in the United States and many other jobs. But they also put a clause in there. It's like no, you agree as a condition of your employment that you're not going to seek out a lawyer, that we go through an arbitration agreement for any and these things are, they are paid for by the employer. And, this sounds great if I'm 17 and I have and it's my first job, or if I'm, poor and it's, not my first job, but, I run into the situation and I'm looking for I run into a conference with my employer. Oh, my check was a little light this week. Oh, I've got issues here, I've got issues there. Then my recourse is to hire a lawyer, which can cost thousands of dollars. And a lawyer is not going to take a little small claims case for, $200 or, worth of missing wages or whatever. They're just not going to cover. There's no recourse for that. Right. And so arbitration kind of sounds like a good deal. It's like, okay, look, we're just going to deal with this internally. And, if it's all taken in good faith, but of course it's never, ever taken in good faith. Right. And so this is very, very standard, like American employment law. But what makes this particularly egregious is not just, Jimmy Dore's like kind of pseudo leftist credentials or whatever, but that this is this is fairly standard among people who like are personal assistants to celebrities or who work around celebrities. This is like Tom Cruise will have like similar like language is you can never say anything bad about Tom Cruise to the press, or else he's going to come sue you for $10,000 per incident, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It sounds like this is very much a big media personality kind of NDA, kind of confidentiality agreement. It doesn't sound like nothing on that level sounds particularly egregious on that level, right? Like this sounds like exactly what you would expect a big media producer to have. Like I guarantee you that like every MSNBC personality has this, right? Anybody with a personal assistant has this. No, you don't actually get to sell pictures of my underwear when it's, filthy, to the National Enquirer, or to, you don't get to, you can't do that, this doesn't sound surprising. It's just that like Jimmy Dore pretending to have this kind of like leftist credential has this, has said, oh, well, these things are like tools of the patriarch or tools of capitalism, tools of whatever, which they absolutely are. And Jimmy Dore is now that he has, real money to throw around, he's using these for his own thing. And I think that like the ordinariness of it is what strikes me here, right? It's not like Jimmy Dore is not a hypocrite because I don't believe Jimmy Dore actually has just credentials is kind of where I go.
No,
like this doesn't surprise me. This is what any celebrity does and would do. And Jimmy Dore sees himself as a celebrity and he doesn't want his dirty laundry aired in public. As neither would you or I. But then again, you or I are not in a position to get to hire personal assistants to do our laundry and clean the grout on our tubs and get rid of the dead hookers. So like it's not that I'm implying that Jimmy Dore has dead hookers flying around. Like certainly, this is anyway. Continue. But what strikes me is the ordinariness of it, and that's what I think is going to kind of come back to us as we move on into our main topic of the episode. Is that it is both extraordinary in the sense of we get to see the inner workings of how these things work, and 100% ordinary in terms of like how the language actually like affects people.
As you say, he's not a hypocrite because Jimmy Dore wouldn't know a principle or a conviction if one jumped out of the toilet bowl and bit him on the dick. But I mean, if you read the rest there's a lot more in the article, and I'll link to it, of course. If you read the article, there's a lot more in it from people who know him, ex-friends and things like that, explaining that the guy's a real asshole, which we already knew, but an aggressive, bullying, exacting, real royal pain in the ass to pretty much everybody all the time, as well as being a sexual harasser, of course, as we know. So he probably needs this sort of bodyguarding,
right? And I think there is obviously there is a spectrum between and if you and I decided to just hire an editor, so we didn't have to edit anymore, and we paid them a fair wage and said, look, this is a thing, I don't think that that's an unreasonable thing to do as you kind of move forward and you create more content. I mean, but ultimately there is a dividing line that you kind of run into at a certain point in which, are you still, working? Or is this still some kind of equitable agreement? Is this still kind of a fair thing, or are you, actually starting to exploit people? And ultimately, you and I are not anywhere near that point, in this process. But I do think about that in terms of, when we start talking about, content creation, that sort of thing is, what are you actively, are you actively exploiting people? Are you even actively exploiting your audience? Are you kind of continuing to do this because it's a moneymaker as opposed to something that's actually valuable in the world? And I think that that's something that, we certainly try to consider, but, we're not doing 5 episodes a week, kind of pointing and laughing at Anna Kasparian, which is kind of a Jimmy Dore's thing at this point. You know what I mean? Anyway, it is something that we are, that at least I am concerned with and kind of think about, on a regular basis. And particularly as I've been prepping this episode, because this is about kind of media culture and kind of taking, what does it mean to take money from these people? And, obviously there's a very different thing in terms of these kind of right-wing griftospheres and, kind of what we're working on. I'm not trying to make that direct comparison, but it's just it is like a thing that's very easy to kind of throw out there, for certain people. And I do just want to kind of highlight that, like, yes, we are aware of this, and hopefully we have not ever come close to crossing that line. So anyway, not that we need to belabor that point, but I did want to call it out there, because people could kind of look at us and go like, well, you make money on your podcast. You know what I mean? But
yeah, it's the Matt Bors cartoon,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So crashing into the main subject of the episode, then what are we talking about?
So, well, I feel like the cold open here, which was, we're talking about Steven Crowder, at least nominally. We're talking about Steven Crowder and the wars that he's been having with, not necessarily, well, the Daily Wire, but also, we spent a lot of time on the show talking about the extreme far right, talking about, the people who are not monetized, who are not kind of getting money off of their content, or who are getting, if they're getting it, they're doing it on either, there's some racist millionaire kind of like feeding $5,000 worth of Bitcoin their way, or they're getting it through donations and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to sort of that, the Matt Walshes of the world, the Ben Shapiros of the world, the Glenn Becks, the PragerU. We don't really spend a lot of time there, but I think there's some really interesting kind of back and forth between these two groups, between this, there's a much more permeable membrane between these two groups now than I think there ever has been. And that goes back even sort of 2015, 2016, when, the sort of alt-right distinction was sort of a major thing. And it was there, and there was some, there was a permeable membrane then. I think it's even more overt now, but it's much more quiet than I think people were noticing it then, and are not noticing exactly how pervasive this is today. And so part of what I want to do with this, I guess it's going to be a 2-part episode, is to kind of talk about that permeable membrane. And so, the sort of tentative title is like noticing in the mainstream. And when I say noticing, what I mean is the far right meaning of noticing, which is noticing how many Jews there are around in certain fields, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're going here, So I just want to like highlight that now. We're talking about Steven Crowder, but we're going to be talking less about him as a person and more about sort of the larger ecosystem around him, even though we're going to spend a lot of time in this episode kind of listening to Steven Crowder. And in fact, our code open in this episode. So the big picture is Steven Crowder leaves the Blaze, and then he starts this website, thebigcon.com, which is supposed to be his like manifesto fighting against the big conservative movement, who are just in line with big tech. And you just have to be a part of my team and not the big tech team. And all I need is your email, and you can join my mug club. And this is a new thing. It's up that Steven Crowder, like, he left the Blaze in December. He left the Blaze like 2 months ago. And he posted at the time a video which was effectively, I'm leaving the Blaze. And the entire thing that he says, that like the very first line is, you need to come join my mug club because I don't have your emails, because the Blaze has all your email addresses. And
Blaze does all that for me. Yeah. Yeah.
And right. I mean, it's literally part of the contract. It's part of the thing that happens with these guys is, I come in as the personality, but I'm the hired gun. Steven Crowder has never been an independent producer. He's always been a hired gun, kind of coming out and doing his thing. Now, he has more creative control over his content because he like employs all his own people and does his own production. This is something that kind of becomes an issue kind of later down the line here. But Steven Crowder has never been like an independent producer in the way that, like The Daily Show has always been independently produced. For whatever else we say about it, and I will say I have and will continue to say, it is horrifying. Don't get me wrong. But it's never been like owned by a media company. And when you listen to these guys long enough, they will let slip that like back in 2016, we got like offers to like come in and join some of these guys, but there were certain things we weren't going to be allowed to say anymore. And
yeah,
guess what that means?
Well,
yeah,
absolutely, yeah. But you know, those guys, and integrity is everything to them,
right? Yeah, exactly. So, so our cold open is pointing out that like before any of this kind of bullshit between Steven Crowder and the Daily Wire happened, he was already pushing this, woe is me, I don't have my email addresses anymore. I need you to go and send me your email address. Now, I went on to thebigcon.com and put in my email address, just wondering, like, is that going to give me, is there more content here? Is there something else I can look at? No, the only thing it does is I put in my email address. It says, thank you for joining at the free level. And then it links me back to the main page. And then suddenly I get like a weekly email from Steven Crowder saying, we're going to be opening up subscriptions soon, et cetera, et cetera. Like that's all this whole thing is. And so this is, Steven Crowder being it is just him trying to get money off of his Mug Club members. That is
yeah.
Whenever every bit of Steven Crowder complaining about like ideologically how he's like differentiating himself from the kind of the big con, none of that is at all true. It is completely, he needs to get his Mug Club memberships back so he can make money. And to be clear, the Mug Club is like, I think it's $60 a year or something like that. It's like $5 a month or some, I forget the exact number, but you might think like being a Mug Club member means like I bought a mug, and now I have a mug that's in my house that I spent $20 on a mug and now I'm a Mug Club. No, you can't buy the mug. You have to join the Mug Club and pay the $60 a month. And they'll send you a mug. They'll send you the mug. Don't get me wrong. You can get the mug, but you can't just buy the mug, because there's a part of me that's like, if I could spend like $10 and get a Steven Crowder mug, that would be an interesting thing to have in my house. I would have to join the Mug Club, and I'm not going to join the Mug Club. So anyway, I know you also
it'd be an interesting conversation piece when you have visitors.
There is, it's like, it'll go right next to my copy of Mein Kampf and my copy of Culture Critique, and all the other, you do kind of collect the detritus of these guys as you kind of move around in this space. And it's like a Steven Crowder mug would actually be something like I would put it on my shelf, next to that. That's where it would go. I would never drink coffee out of it, but maybe hemlock. So
yeah, if it really got to it,
yeah.
So in case you, dear listener, are not sad enough, like me, to have been following this, to follow the controversies between right wing internet shitheads, and you don't know really what we're talking about, I'll see if I can get you up to speed. So, as Daniel said, Crowder is working for The Blaze, which is, of course, Glenn Beck's right-wing propaganda media organization, and his contract is ending. And the Daily Wire, which is Ben Shapiro's right-wing propaganda media organization, gets in touch. They're in contact anyway, and proposes a deal. It wasn't a contract; it was a proposal for a possible deal. And it's a frankly staggering $50 million over 4 years, which is $12.5 million a year. The only problem with this, and it's absolutely, you'll be shocked when you hear this. It's absolutely outrageous. Steven Crowder's pay decreases if he gets kicked off or suspended from platforms. He's already demonetized on YouTube, by the way. But if he does something or says something that gets him suspended, he'll have to take a bit of a financial hit. And that really amounts to nothing more than the Daily Wire saying that we share the risk, of monetary losses. You and I, Steven Crowder, we have to share the risk a bit. That's it.
That's a sponsorship boycott. So that's saying, hey, liberals, boycotts work. They work on our guys. We'll punish them for you.
Steven Crowder turns it down. He wants $30 million a year. That's $120 million over 5 years. And apparently, according to Jeremy Boring, who's the CEO of the Daily Wire, they actually thought about this for like a couple of seconds. This is interesting because this gets to the money issue. But they kind of ask him, what sort of audience can we expect? you to bring with you. He doesn't know. He doesn't know how many Mug Club members he has because the Blaze does all that for him. But he makes wildly optimistic guesses and tells them as fact, oh yeah, I'll be bringing this many people with me, with no real reason to come up with those numbers at all. So the Daily Wire turned him down, and he makes this video in which he complains about Big Con being in bed with big tech. He doesn't name the Daily Wire initially. And one of the funny things about this is that Jordan Peterson, who now works for the Daily Wire, doing this ridiculous show where he just sits in a chair and pontificates, and they back it with Game of Thrones style music. Jordan Peterson, before he realized that Steven Crowder was talking about the Daily Wire, he initially sort of came out in support of Steven Crowder, and he had to walk that back. He had to delete his tweets or whatever it was. So yeah, Jeremy Boring, the CEO of the Daily Wire, responds, and then Steven Crowder calls him and tapes him. And it sounds to me like he sort of tricks him into talking about, young creators have to be wage slaves for a while, and then shears that of context to make him sound bad. Not that I'm defending the honor of anybody that works for the Daily Wire, you understand. So all the Daily Wire people go on attack mode. Candace Owens goes on Tim Pool and denounces him, calls him a socialist. He's behaving like a socialist. Because, of course, what he's saying it's essentially that they're all slaves to big tech. Anybody that works for the Daily Wire is now a slave to big tech.
Big tech is in bed with Big Con. The people you thought, the people I thought were fighting for you, a lot of it has been a Big Con. Now, I'm specifically avoiding naming names or going after individuals in this video because I genuinely hope that those I'm addressing, and you know who you are, have a change of heart. Please don't make me have to provide receipts.
And as Sam Cedar on the Majority Report pointed out, one of the interesting ironies about this is that all these supposed libertarians and boosters of capitalism, they apparently do understand that it is possible for employment contracts to be exploitative.
Do not, kids, under any circumstances, sign a contract with people who claim to be conservative, but will penalize you 25% for any demonetization or sponsor boycott.
Of course, Steven Crowder has the luxury of turning this contract down, which maybe you don't if you need to go and work at the butcher's shop or whatever in order to survive. But Steven Crowder has, whether deliberately or not, he's touched a sore spot here. He's raised the issue of where the money comes from. Where do these organizations get these huge sums? And it raises the specter of mega donors, billionaires who pay for propaganda. And we know that the PragerU is hugely funded by the Wilkes brothers. We know the Wilkes brothers fund other online right-wing media, the Koch brothers, etc. Because all this culture war stuff, the right-wing ideas, the pro-capitalism boosting online, they fund it so that people grow up to vote Republican, and thus for the party that's going to work best for corporations. So what's really going on here, of course, isn't that Big Con is in bed with big tech. It's that Big Con is a creature of big capital, and that's really what Steven Crowder is unwittingly, or maybe wittingly, I don't know, put out into the open, which is the root of this massive flap that they're in.
So yeah, I think that's like a really good summary of the of sort of the Crowder bits of this nonsense, which I think again is something that has been covered pretty well in other media, and which is very deeply. I mean, it's fascinating in one sense, in that it really gives us a sense of kind of what's going on behind the scenes of these media companies. And something that I think also reveals some of this is this whole Elijah Schaffer drama, which you and I have been covering off and on for the last, what, like a year now. So
since you stumbled across him,
since I stumbled across him doing research on Kyle fucking Rittenhouse of all things,
yeah, and immediately thought to yourself, this man is horrifying. I must follow him.
I must spend many hours learning all I can learn about him, and everything you learn about him, he is more and more awful. We will listen to a little bit of Elijah Schaffer here shortly, but before we do that, what's kind of come to light?
The dulcet tones.
Before we do that, what's come to light in the time I've been prepping this episode is Sydney Watson, his former You Are Here co-host, sued him and sued the Blaze technically. So did not sue him, but he is named in the lawsuit. I have put a link to the lawsuit in the show notes, and she's essentially sued the Blaze for an unhealthy work environment, for like sexual harassment in the workplace, like those sorts of issues, and details like on some level the kinds of harassment that she received on the set of You Are Here, and in particular noted that Elijah Schaffer brought on guests like Nick Fuentes, who then spewed like overtly misogynistic bigotry, and the
women shouldn't vote, and yeah,
right, which I do find it fascinating when these people fight, because they never fight over ideology. It's never a question of well, actually, all this horrifying right-wing agenda shit, I don't believe in that. It's like, no, I do, but also he hates women, and therefore he's a little bit too overt in this hatred of women, and therefore I can't be involved in this.
It's always the leopards, isn't it? It's always the same old leopards faces dynamic thing that comes back over and over again.
Exactly.
So I guess asshole guys making the working environment. We were just talking about Jimmy Dore, making everybody's working environment fucking horrible. That's just pretty much a given, isn't it? Throughout this entire industry, so
it is just dudes being dudes. It does seem to be a very common thing, and that really connects the earlier segment of the Jimmy Dore segment to kind of what's going on here. Is that this is all about these kind of like media companies and the way that powerful men are allowed to behave. That's sort of what's going on with Steven Crowder. That's definitely what's going on with Elijah Schaffer, but I find it interesting that Crowder left the Blaze right around the same time that the Elijah Schaffer, shit started to happen. Like this is within the same like couple of months, right? And I am not suggesting that Steven Crowder was like physically or emotionally or sexually abusive to his staff or whatever. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that you do get a sense that there is kind of there are things kind of bubbling underneath. And when you listen to these people who are involved in these companies or have been, sort of, auxiliary involved in these companies, kind of talk about their experiences and talk about like what really goes on behind the scenes at TPUSA conferences, which are apparently TPUSA conferences are absolute fuck fests. Like it's actually hilarious to talk about like
in what sense fuck
like,
fests? I mean literally
in the sense
fests
that, like,
of fuck.
all of the guests and all of the everybody behind the scenes, all of the people who have attend the conferences who are like kind of up and coming right-wing personalities are all just sleeping together all the time.
Oh god. Oh no. Oh Jesus.
And like,
did you really have to tell me that? Oh, I'm gonna have to drill a hole in my skull and pour bleach in now.
I didn't even pull audio of this, but it is like one of those things that like you just like I've heard it from like multiple accounts at this point, because as we're going to learn, these people do like to go on to Twitter Spaces and just start spilling the beans because they think nobody can record these things. This is kind of delightful, because it's not that I'm recording them, but their fans record them and then put them up on YouTube where I can find them. This is the same thing that happened with the Terragram people. It's like they would go to like extreme lengths to make sure that like nobody could get to their stuff, nobody could record it. It was very hard for anyone except for with people in the know to be in the to listen, to be in the audience, and then one of their followers would just record it and then put it up on the internet where you can find it.
Well, it's like with Nick Fuentes, isn't it? You didn't really have to do all that much research to find all the good Fuentes stuff, because one of his fans had made YouTube compilations of every bad thing he'd ever said and just put them there. Nick Fuentes fan compilations. There it is, packaged for you.
Fuentes is so bad that like multiple of his fans would find these would put up these like clips shows and these like clips channels, and then when the clips channels got deleted, they would just create new channels. So
they're determined you should have these clips.
They are absolutely determined. just to give you a sense of kind of like what this is, there was a thread kind of going around by someone who calls himself what is it, Patriot J. Now,
Oh,
I don't
he
know
sounds good.
I don't know who Patriot J is. Apparently, he's a writer for Breitbart. It is
Oh,
weird to
gets
me.
better and better.
It is weird to me that you know, the longer I research this stuff and the more time I spend kind of like exploring these little worlds, the more like of these like little ancillary figures come out of the woodwork, and then you like click on them and they have 80,000 Twitter followers.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know that Patriot J has that many Twitter followers, but it's someone I'd never heard of, but apparently has been, kind of involved in this for a while. He's been, again, he's been a writer for Breitbart. He's a lawyer, at least self-described. I mean, so I'm just kind of taking him at his word. But when this lawsuit dropped, he wrote a long thread about it. I've linked it in the show notes. And then like ostensibly like progressive, people are like sharing this as, sort of, like the source on it, which it is a good source. I mean, I'm sharing it for a reason, but sometimes sometimes you just don't have to hand it to them, right? there is a like, maybe you could summarize instead of retweeting, but that's another issue. So anyway, here's Patriot J talking about the lawsuit for 38 seconds on the kill stream. This is Ethan Ralph's kill stream, and Ethan Ralph, I don't know. People of good conscience can disagree on Ethan Ralph, but he's a Nazi. He is definitely a Nazi, in the sense of like, there are people who I know and trust and care about who who have had my back in the past, who are like, oh, he doesn't have an ideology. He's just out there doing. He's a Holocaust denier. He's a Nazi. He hates Jews. Like, I mean, and he's one of these kind of old school Gamergate guys. We could do an episode on him, but then he would start to pay attention to me, and I just don't want to live in that world where he pays any amount of attention to me, because he is absolutely disgusting. And I just don't need him in my life.
Don't need it. Yeah.
So anyway, here's a little bit of a Patriot J, and this is J, the letter J, just to be clear, and Ethan Ralph chatting about the Sydney Watson lawsuit.
Right. And maybe she waited to file the lawsuit to see if they would do anything, because she does note the fact that he was ultimately terminated. And then I believe she kind of alludes to the rumors that he was terminated because he sexually harassed another female employee at the Blaze. So she doesn't specifically state that it's true, but she kind of puts that in the fact as well.
Well, we know for a fact, because I broke that story, and that's Sarah Gonzalez, and that was reported in the Daily Beast and by me, who was originally the one who broke the story. And so she's alleging a pattern of, which is how you get the money out of these companies. It's not just a one-off. It's a pattern of misconduct. That's how you get paid.
Exactly.
Ethan Ralph is like, well, I dropped that story about Savannah Hernandez being sexually assaulted by Elijah Schaffer, which
this is coming back to me now. It was a movie screening, wasn't it?
A movie screening of a movie that Elijah Schaffer had co-produced.
Yeah.
And, I am still looking around for that movie, because I've not like looked that hard for it. I'm sure it's findable these days, but one day it was the second part of a documentary series, as they say. But apparently at the screening, he at least allegedly,
whatever it's about, it obviously didn't hold Elijah's attention as much as it should have done.
as much as Sarah Gonzalez's breasts, apparently. Because apparently he was fondling her chest during the screening. And believe me, my the humor that is in my voice, it's not because I think that is a funny topic, so much as Elijah sort of holding up this kind of like Christian morality version of himself, while like just sort of openly groping the talent in his life.
Exactly. Exactly.
And,
that's what we're laughing at.
The
sexual assault isn't funny.
The fact that I know that Sarah Gonzalez was also the spicy Latina brought in on the episode of You're Here with Kyle Rittenhouse, because Elijah Schaffer knew that Kyle liked spicy Latina girls. That just adds an extra level of vileness to this whole thing, and the level of misogyny that just like pervaded that show. It is something that it's something else that again, not to hand it to Ethan Ralph, but he does kind of talk about on that episode. It's like, yeah, anybody who watched You Are Here knows that these allegations are 100% true. There is absolutely no question in anybody's mind. If you watch that show, you know exactly. Yes, no, this is absolutely correct. Cindy Watson was deeply uncomfortable to be there. She was mocked on camera and off by Elijah Schaffer and by the entire audience. Every allegation in this lawsuit is 100% true. And I don't want to hand it to her. She is disgusting and awful in her own ways, but I do hope she gets a nice fat paycheck out of the Blaze for it. Like that.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Anyway, we've now sort of like talked a little bit about sort of the backstory of these lawsuit of this Crowder leaving the Blaze, and we've kind of talked about like what is it. This is all about money for Crowder, right? And this is all about, trying to gain revenue for himself. This is all about trying to gain his Mug Club subscriber list. This is all about growing his brand, possibly going independent, possibly looking for a financial backer. And I don't know like how much of this we need to actually include in the episode, but I feel like it's worth at least playing the clip of Jeremy Boring, who is the I think the CEO of the Daily Wire. Now, Crowder didn't work for the Daily Wire, but the Daily Wire approached him with with sort of an outline of a contract. This is kind of a first offer to get you to the negotiating table and see if we can make a deal on this. And no man has a more apt surname than Jeremy Boring.
Yes. He likes to make holes in wood, you mean?
Yes, indeed. My favorite thing that I ran across while I was doing the prep for this episode is that Jeremy Boring is in he has a company. He sells razors, Jerry's Razors, and the reason that he sells razors as one of his ancillary gigs is that the company Harry's Razors, which is a U.S. based. I don't know if they kind of cross the pond at all, but Harry's Razors are a razor company. They one of those kind of Dollar Shave Club kind of knockoffs. You can buy them in stores and everything, but it's a sort of a higher end brand razor company, and they were advertising on the Daily Wire for a while until they realized that the content of the Daily Wire is completely disgusting and decided not to advertise anymore. And so then Jeremy Boring created Jerry's Razors, which is like the actually manly razor company. And I included a link in the show notes to an article about that. And one of their ads, which is it needs to be seen to be believed. It is the hyper macho to the point of parody, to the point of self-parody. So
you mean Boring was the CEO of the Daily Wire? They had an advertiser who sold razors. Those people realized after advertising with them, they suddenly realized what the Daily Wire was and cancelled their advertising. So he thought, we need razors advertised, obviously. So I'll set up my own razor company, like for chads, for proper right-wing chads, and advertise those on the Daily Wire. That's what
I don't know that he's advertising them on the Daily Wire, but there's definitely this like sense of like, oh, this is our new thing. It's like you gotta shove it in the hands of the woke kind of thing, like that's the whole process. So
I'm sure when Ben Shapiro starts to need to shave, he'll know where to go.
He has been growing this like something on his face lately, and I don't like to make fun of people with terrible beards because that's never been a problem for me. I've been shaving since I was 12 years old, but that is a truly awful beard that Ben Shapiro is sporting these days. Anyway, so I think it's time. I think we should get a hint, because we're going to hear Nick Fuentes talk about this later, and so I think it's worth kind of listening a little bit to Mr. Boring here talk about the nature of this contract. And On the like basic terms of, what is actually being alleged, like without the sort of angle of that this is all just posturing on Crowder's part in terms of like he's trying to make himself a victim, et cetera, et cetera. If you were to, just look at the merits here, Jeremy Boring is absolutely correct on everything that he has to say about this. Again, he's a terrible human being. He's the CEO of the Daily Wire, but that doesn't make him wrong here.
No, he's right. The thing in the proposal about, we take some of the money back, or however it worked, you make a bit less money if you get yourself demonetized or banned or whatever. That's, as I said, that's just them saying this might happen. We share that risk a bit. That's all they're doing. And the money that he was offered is insane. It's an insane amount of money, and the amount he wanted is insanely more than an already insane amount. Fuck Daily Wire and everybody associated with it, but he's not wrong.
Apparently the initial offer was $50 million, which is over 5 years, which is 4 years, because it was $12.5 million a year. And like the one thing is like his production budget comes out of that, because like Crowder uses all his own people as opposed to like kind of like using what the Daily Wire would like provide in terms of their like camera crew or whatever. Like that's just how he's always done it. That's how Crowder's always done it. Which is, he works with his people, that's a, creative choice. That's a, and so, but his production budget would also come out of that, which does change the matter slightly, but it's still an ungodly sum of money. And apparently Crowder was asking for $130 million. And I guarantee you that extra $80 million was not going to like camera crew salaries.
I've seen Crowder stuff. It's not a multi-million-dollar budget show. This what he does not take $12.5 million a year. It just doesn't.
I mean, you've got like kind of like the on-air talent, quote unquote, but you've got Crowder, and then you've got like usually they've got several kind of producers and kind of guests or major kind of regular co-hosts, etc. And then you've got a camera crew and you've got a set, and all of that costs money. But you're right, this is not this is not like so well produced that you can understand why it costs $12.5 million a year. But it is, it is well produced. It's just sort of one of those, like, I think about like, friends of the show who also do kind of, like, web, YouTube videos. I think about, Sophie from Mars, who, was on a recent episode, and, I'm imagining offering her, $12.5 million a year to produce her YouTube videos, and, her turning it down because, no, I need, that isn't enough money, for
not enough.
Her.
Damn you.
Yeah. And if anything, her videos look better than anything the Daily Wire has ever produced. Anyway, we're going to listen to a little bit of Jeremy Boring here. And
Mr. Boring.
50% of the money that he's making from advertisers is suddenly gone, and we're not able to replace that revenue within 90 days. Then his fee will be reduced by 25% until such time as the ad revenue has been restored for a period of 90 days, and then it would all reset. Stephen says, all the left does is boycott our advertisers, so this just says to the left, your boycotts work and we'll enforce it for you. We will punish the content creator for you. But this isn't about punishing the content creator. This is about if the Daily Wire is going to leverage, I can't stress it, probably $100 million by the time you have marketing and infrastructure costs, by the time you pay for all the legal compliance, all the technology that it takes to support Stephen's show and Stephen's show, even at the price that we offered for it, which he would have wanted much more, at least $100 million. Obviously, if the show makes dramatically less money, well, then Stephen has to make less money because we're making less money. And I brought this up to Stephen on the phone, and I said, Stephen, if your show, if we guarantee you $1 for your show, and the show makes $1 in ad revenue and $1 in subscription revenue, then how does the money work? Well, it works that $2 come in, you get your guaranteed $1, we get $1. What do we do? What do you do with your $1? Well, you produce your show and you pay yourself. What do we do with our $1? Well, we market your show, provide all the back-end infrastructure, pay for the 250 plus humans who work to make all of this continue to grow. By the way, we don't pay for one single person more than we need.
all of this talk about, sort of like YouTube regulations and like, sort of like how restricted content is really, I mean, I mentioned something from Mars, and I've been in contact with like YouTube creators over the course of the time making this podcast, and and I've been listening to YouTube creators and such even longer, and any discussion of like, the daily, like if you go to Facebook and look at their like top 10 stories that are like shared every week, like 7 out of the 10 are these like kind of right-wing media conglomerates. The Daily Wire has like 4 out of the 10 by themselves. The Blaze has like another 2, and then Newsmax or AN or whatever. Like these are not like restricted channels at all in that sense. They get massive media production, and what Boring is really talking about there is maintaining their good relationship with YouTube. It's maintaining that look, Steven Crowder working for the Blaze got away with a ton of shit, like a ton of shit, that our left-wing friends who make this kind of content would never ever get away from, would never ever get away with. And to pretend that like they're the ones who are censored because there is some, because YouTube pushes back very slightly on the like worst forms of bigotry, is it's just rich. And I did want to just include this bit. Now, these guys are not fascists in the slightest, and I hate bringing them into this, but this was a funny moment. So one of the things that I do when I'm not like following these terrible people, I've gotten deeply into, and this is embarrassing for me to talk about, but I did want to include it here. There's this YouTube show. It's actually a Nebula show that's also on YouTube, and it's called Jet Lag the Game. And it's like these like 20-something nerds who play like reality show games where they travel around places and like play little board games with them. So this is one of their seasons was they traveled across Europe and played tag, chasing each other on trains effectively. And it's a lot of fun. It's a great little thing. It's been like one of the little joys of like me getting to watch YouTube. And in the middle of one of their like Nebula after show from season 3, one of the co-hosts talked about like how tough it was to record this season. And I want to just play this little clip. It's very short, but I want to play this little clip to get a sense of what like professional YouTubers actually worry about in terms of what they're willing to share on air on YouTube. So let's just play this real quick. And again, I apologize, but I do want to highlight the absurdity of like what Steven Crowder is actually complaining about here. By the end, I was like, my whole body, I mean, I don't know. It's like Nebula. Can I get into it? I had these like horrible lesions. You had lesions? Yeah, it was terrible. Should we put up a photo of it? Yeah. Lesions? Where? Hang on. When you say lesions, like, I'm trying to think of a polite way to describe this. Like the inside of my thighs were like, there's like blood. Oh my God. So you had some serious chafing. Yeah. You need to wear like compression shorts. Yeah, well, so I learned a lot. But basically, it was, if we have to cut to just now, because that's not acceptable what I just said. It was a brutal season. My whole body hurt. So Ben Doyle, like professional writer on YouTube, and now a professional YouTuber, ran around Europe for 3 days and got like serious chafing on the inside of his thighs, and didn't want to describe that in too harsh of words for fear that, there would be some algorithmic, structuring that was going to like fault the channel. On the other hand, Steven Crowder will like redo the George Floyd murder and pretend that it wasn't as bad as it could have been, and will literally do like Chinese caricatures, and will call and will call people the 600 F word like openly on the channel. That's the difference in terms of this thing. And that's why, again, it's a silly thing. I just wanted to include it. I wanted to just gotta give some perspective on this, because whenever these right-wing dipshits start talking about this and start talking about how they've been censored, etc., there's never a sense of like, well, what is that? Everybody on YouTube complains about suffering from the YouTube algorithm. This is like the nature of what you do. And it is to the deep discredit of YouTube, and to like the relationship that YouTube has with these like major media companies, that they don't get demonetized even more. They get away with huge amounts of this bullshit. And so, again, sorry to make you listen to the word lesion 500 times, but I thought that was when I watched that was very funny to me. Because
you already mentioned the concept of people at TP USA conferences having sex with each other. Lesions, it's nothing compared to that. So don't worry about it. Bleeding lesions is, it's a refresher
compared to TP USA personalities. Finger banging each other on the desks of in hotel rooms. I should go find that clip and just put it right here. Anyway, so that is the end of talking about TPUSA, shenanigans and Ben Doyle's lesions, excuse me, because now it's time we gotta do a little bit of Elijah Schaffer here, because Elijah Schaffer recently was fired from the Blaze. Now he is independent. I have been following his content pretty attentively. I mean, I don't watch every episode of Slightly Offensive, but I watch a number of them. I try to at least tune into a little bit of each one. He is largely now, instead of having Sydney Watson as his co-host, who is, giving her credit, she is knowledgeable about the issues of the day, at least in the sense of enough to kind of get away with being conservative pundit, etc. And has some kind of media training, and is she has her own show, and she's doing her own things right now. Instead, he is now hanging out with his wife, who does not give a single solitary shit about any of this. And is very open about that, and will just sit while Elijah Schaffer is talking on stream about whatever bullshit thing that is going through his head, and she will literally just be sitting and flicking through the memes that the chat is sharing into their private channel. And just interrupt
mirroring their off-air dynamic, no doubt. He just talks and talks, and she just sits there looking at her phone. Yeah.
And it's also one of those things to where and I really I shared this privately with some people. Elijah Schaffer's wife Kedzie looks very similar to Sydney Watson. In the sense that they are both sort of very slender brunette women from Australia. In certain photos, you could almost you could actually confuse them to one another. I shared them, kind of a side-by-side photo and sent it to somebody, and they did not immediately realize it was two different women. They don't look that much alike if you kind of know if you're poised for it. So I'm not trying to overstate this, but it really felt that felt like a really creepy moment for me. When I saw Elijah Schaffer's wife for the first time. So anyway, but she knows enough that there are certain things that she's not allowed to talk about on stream. And so guess where we're going? Anyway, this is Elijah Schaffer kind of trying to explain. He literally spends 20 minutes trying to explain the situation from his perspective as someone who has been in these media companies. And again, she does not care about the details of Stephen Crowder's, of the deal that Stephen Crowder was offered by the Daily Wire. She could not give any fewer shits about it, and just sort of sits and stares at him until he finally gets to the goddamn point. And this is when he kind of starts to get to the goddamn point. So here we go.
When it's Jeremy Boring, he's mentioning Tyler Carden, who's a great guy, and then he's mentioning Stephen Crowder, who's a great guy, and you start hearing people that to be good people, that are honest, that just try to do their best. We're all flawed. It's a hard thing to really take sides, because you realize that I don't want to slap right. I don't want to punch right. I'm not into that anymore. And I'm not petty against right-wing people, because I just don't hold on to grudges, and I don't do that kind of stuff. And I don't think that's what's going on here. So anybody who's got hate in their heart, it's just Jew wire or whatever, it's okay, save that shit. Well, I don't care. And then anyone who's just Daily Wires knows what they're doing, and Stephen Crowder's just jealous. Fuck you too. You guys are all retarded. You're gay and retarded, and you're fake. And why don't you actually be a real person for a moment and realize the reason why we ought to talk about this is because Stephen Crowder made some serious accusations against an unknown de facto group. There is a group. There's certain media groups that are run by certain types of people that love litigation and contract. Kanye West talked about that at one point in his life, but he got canceled for it. So we'll stay off that for the remainder of this conversation. Who is they? Who is they? Who is they, baby?
I can't answer that question.
Well, we get into today's story.
Words cannot express my disdain. I'm sorry. They really can't.
Not the first time we played Elijah Schaffer and his wife on the show talking about how they're not allowed to talk about Jews. This is kind of where this episode is going, is that the level of anti-Semitism that used to be like reserved for the people that I follow is now like absolutely bubbling under the surface of these like major media companies. Like this is the thing that when they say there are certain things I'm not allowed to talk about in my contract, they will hide behind like, well, we're not allowed to talk about anti-vax stuff. We're not allowed to talk about that kind of thing. that gets demonetized by YouTube. That's not really the thing that they're talking about, that they're not allowed to say. Is that their audience, particularly their young audience who are sitting there in the chats and pressuring them, want them to mock Jews. You notice that, the Jew wire or whatever it's called was Elijah Schaffer used that. That is, he uses that not because he's saying that, to be clear, but because his audience is saying that. And Elijah Schaffer would maybe like to go work for the wire at some point. You know what I mean? And so he can't just kind of go out and, be as open about this as he would like to be, but it's a signal for what the audience is expecting from these guys, and everyone in this conversation knows that. There is no way that Jeremy Boring and Steven Crowder and all of his crew and all of the people at the Daily Wire, up to and including Ben Shapiro, there is no doubt that these people all understand that this is where the audience is going, and this is where the audience has been for a long time. Every single one of the chats that you like, if I play the live chat on one of these shows, on Tim Pool's show, on any of these shows, it is, Jew, all the way, like it is constant. This is not hidden. And the personalities themselves are people who have now come up watching this stuff from like 2015, 2016, 2017. And they are now the up and coming stars are now the people who believe this shit and who are having to hide it just a little bit more than they would like to. And that is a really, really bad sign. And that's what the rest of this episode is kind of be.
I don't know what to say, except that is a really powerful demonstration of the snowball, the dialectic at work, and the snowball running down the hill and getting bigger and bigger as it rolls.
I regret to inform you, we've done our Elijah Schaffer bit. That's all the Elijah Schaffer you get in this episode. Don't worry.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's all the Elijah Schaffer. And regret to inform you that we have to take a step down. We have to listen to some Nick Fuentes now, because Fuentes had his own opinion of what was going on. And this is kind of like,
really, that's not like him.
What Elijah Schaffer wasn't willing to say on his show, well, Nick Fuentes, he definitely was. So,
well, that's his corner of the market, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
It would matter that the people that run the country believe in him or don't believe in him. It's a funny concept.
He's talking about Jesus, just by the way.
Isn't it? People say, what does them being Jewish have to do with it? They don't believe in God. You think that doesn't matter? You think that that's arbitrary? Of course it matters. And of course they have different ways. And of course they have different practices. They reject Jesus Christ. They worship the law. They worship the ritual. They worship their ethnicity. Of course they have a perverse inversion of all the Christian morals. And this is why you get this. And frankly, it may sound like an exaggeration, but it does come down to things like this, where Crowder, who I'm not even the biggest fan of, comes forward and is very honestly says, look, how are you going to have an opposition to this satanic system if you're literally in bed with it? And Shapiro comes back with what? Conceit, arrogance. Well, maybe you're not smart enough to understand it, but we're offering you're insulting someone offering you $50 million. What are you, Lucifer? What are you, the devil? Well, that sounds like the devil to me. That sounds like the scorned demon is what that sounds like. You didn't take the offer from Satan. And he says, I could give you the world. That sounds like the devil trying to tempt Jesus. Not saying that Crowder's like Jesus, obviously, but saying that attitude, you know, you stupid goy, I'm offering you $50 million. You should be grateful. Really? And it's the whole crew. Jeremy Boring says, you can't just say we're going to pay $50 million even if your show doesn't bring in any money. Adding, and he says, $50 million minus 25% is not a punishment by any standard of any human being. So it's just all about the fucking money then. You're not even worth $50 million. You can't live off $50 million minus 25%. Really?
Lots to say about this.
So he's managed to turn a situation where Steven Crowder is offered, you know, Steven Crowder comes back from an offer for 50 million. He says, no, that's not enough. I want 130 million. And he's managed to turn that into the greedy, evil, money-obsessed Jew doesn't understand why anybody would turn down a large amount of money. Look, that's a huge amount of money. I, as an evil greedy Jew, don't understand anything. We don't understand principles. We don't understand morality. We don't understand spirituality. We have none of these Christian virtues. Everything is money to us. So I have no ability to comprehend why you could possibly turn down that amount of money. So this story isn't about the greed or the cynicism of Steven Crowder. This is about the inhuman, money obsessed. This is about how Ben Shapiro is a fucking Gringotts goblin. That's what he's done with that story.
Exactly. And this is kind of like what Crowder was kind of trying to say in some of the earlier clips this
is why I feel kind of foolish, because when I was doing the thing earlier, the sort of the précis of the whole thing, I nearly said something like, and there is, if you think about it, there's an anti-Semitic hint in here. There's a tinge to some of what Crowder's saying. And of course, now here we are in the episode, and it's more than a hint,
Yeah, no. Steven Crowder wants to talk about how the filthy Jews are robbing him of $80 million, right? Yeah. And he's using this, this fig leaf of, like freedom of his journalistic integrity for being willing to, kind of go out there and stopping the big con. He's using that as a way of pretending that that's not what he's the big con. He's using that this thing as a way of pretending, is putting on his own virtue and pretending that this isn't about him not getting paid what he thinks he's worth, and he's trying to kind of pull more revenue out of this thing himself. And you get a tinge of Fuentes himself thinking about like how like the media career he was very likely offered. Like, people forget this, but his first like sort of like job was as I think 17 or 18. I think he was 17 years old. He had like this little show for the Right Side Broadcasting Network. This is, a smaller, kind of right-wing organization. This is like the Bush Leagues that feed people into these, the Daily Wires and the Blaze and that sort of thing. For, this is where you get your start. You get your start in these young Republican clubs. You get your start in these and you prove that you can, draw an audience and that you can, produce the content, and you work your way up. Fuentes, for whatever reason, whether whatever you think he believes or doesn't believe, or whatever you think was kind of going on behind the scenes, he was very likely offered a position like this. And when he attended Unite the Right, and when it kind of was revealed that he attended Unite the Right, that seems to be kind of the moment in which he was not able to like pursue these kinds of jobs anymore. And because he was optically bad, and then suddenly had to kind of throw in his lot with the more kind of explicit white nationalist types. And this is also, in that clip, this is much more overt than you're kind of used to seeing Fuentes be, doing these sort of like the stereotypical kind of like the broad Brooklyn Jew accent, etc. That's something that Nick Fuentes usually does not do. And that's something that is like absolutely pervasive on the, certainly in sort of the alt-right days of 2017 or so. Like it was so constant as to be like, that's how you identified these people, was them doing that stupid voice. And Fuentes kind of doing a little bit of that, and using the word goy kind of openly. It's not like a full mask off moment or anything. It's not like that, but it is a little bit more extreme or a little bit more aggressive than Fuentes usually gets about this. And I definitely
see. You think this kind of got to him, this story? He saw the story of Crowder being horribly misused by these greedy, this greedy Jew-run organization that's pretending to be conservative, but is actually in league with woke big tech. So it's all about the money for them. They don't really have conservative principles. And he saw some of his own tragedy mirrored in that, and that got him really invested.
No, definitely. I mean, I think there's a very clear, kind of through line here. If you spent enough time kind of like following Fuentes and, at length, as opposed to just kind of watching the highlights, there is definitely a sense of, Fuentes is trying to build the kind of network that will name the Jew effectively, that will do the noticing in public. Like that's what Fuentes is ultimately trying to build. He's trying to build his own alternative Daily Wire, because the Daily Wire wouldn't hire his stupid ass.
At this rate, I can almost see Fuentes and Crowder hooking up together.
Yeah,
because,
no, I mean, I don't think Fuentes could pay Crowder's salary demands, but you could definitely see it a few years from now for sure. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think Crowder is kind of J-pilled. I mean, we talked a little bit about this in the back channel, but Crowder's stance on anti-Semitism was always like this kind of, he professed to dislike it because it lumps the good Jews in with the bad ones, which is itself, of course, an ancient anti-Semitic trope. Because but then recently he did just after the Yay thing, the Yay West thing, he did that thing where he said, well, there are a disproportionate number of secular humanists with Jewish last names in banking and Hollywood, and that's a conversation we could have. He did that fairly recently, and that's classic scapegoating, classic code talking, and it's talking about the Jews are these big rich capitalists who degrade our culture through communism and debt and stuff like this, through Hollywood and debt, and it leaves him the wiggle room where he can not offend like potential or actual big donors or employers who might want him for his politics, who might themselves happen to be Jewish. Like, for instance, The Blaze is co-owned by Mark Levin. Now, he's a far rightist, he's a climate denier, conspiracy theorist, etc. He's of Jewish origins, so this is like the two-step he has to dance. But I think maybe I don't know whether it's just because the contract with The Blaze is coming up or what else is happening, but I think Crowder is kind of I think he's getting tired of that level of code talking, and definitely that's what leads to this very distinct insinuation in the whole thing about big con is in league with big tech. What Fuentes said openly about Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire, I think Crowder was implying all that in his volley against the Daily Wire in the first place.
No, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And I mean, that's kind of why I saw that and saw the kind of the far right response to it, the further than far right, assuming Crowder is like your measuring point, there's still like a far right compared to Crowder, right?
Oh yeah.
Not to deny that Crowder is himself far right, of course, but
that might be where he sees his career trajectory going, into that kind of big budget, mainstreamed version of of conservative media. Basically what he does now, but with the Fuentes level of frankness about what they actually think. Maybe even with Fuentes in tow. Who the hell knows at this point?
I mean, the one thing that we're not kind of talking about here that we may do kind of a follow-up episode here is TRS and the NJP and the Daily Shoah, and it is very clear that Crowder knows exactly who those guys are, and like they have constantly been fighting over the same audience, right? There's sort of a gag that's been going on since 2016, at least 2016, on the Daily Show, in which they talk, whenever they talk about Crowder, they talk about how extreme far right that guy is. When to them he's the ultimate cuck boy, because he's not talking about the Jew, because he goes right up to the end, he goes right up to the thing, but he won't talk about Jews, and therefore his work is completely meaningless for them, right? And there is, they won't, Crowder will not talk about this in public. I mean, if he goes independent, if he actually goes independent, and then you may very well see more of that, more and more of him, really kind of calling out those extreme far right people, and that would be a very a very interesting development. Let's just put it that way. One more thing I do want to highlight about that clip, just before we move on to the other Nick Fuentes clip I have, which is just the continuation of this one. But I did want to just highlight this, is that something that I've talked about before about Nick Fuentes is that whenever he talks about, quote unquote, the Jews or Jewish people, he always frames it as a religious objection, as opposed to sort of the Kevin McDonald, ethnic, racial thing. He never talks about the Jews as a racial group and that they are born, through genetic imperative or whatever to do these things. It's always a religious values kind of thing. And that's how he manages to keep people like Laura Loomer or Milo Yiannopoulos kind of in his circle, basically. That's how he avoids being kind of lumped in with, the worst of the worst, is because he keeps that finest layer of distinction there. Now, I think it's a distinction without a difference ultimately, but it is worth highlighting that Nick Fuentes will never invite Kevin McDonald onto his show or that sort of thing. He's never going to kind of go that far with it. It's always going to be about the religious values. And that's, again, one of those fig leaves that these guys use, this sort of trad-cath mentality, this Christian nationalist mentality, as a way of covering over the more overtly racial anti-Semitism by pretending it's all about religion. And I think that is worth pointing out when we kind of talk about Nick Fuentes in particular, is that, that's one of the ways that he maintains that slight hint of mainstream credibility. Whereas I think if he was kind of openly talking about genetic factors that make the Jews money grubbing, parasites, I think even some of the people who support him in principle would treat him like the hot potato he is.
Candace Owen says it's a bitch move. It's a bitch move? Working for Ben Shapiro. Sorry. And, I talked to Candace Owens, and, I had a good conversation with her when all the Ye stuff was going on and everything. And I do like her for what it's worth, but that's not right for her to say that. It's not a bitch. I don't know what she means when she says it's a bitch move. And to bring up, there were allegations about you. We're going to Me Too him now? Contract dispute. Now it's a Me Too thing. And this is the thing about Jews. They're unscrupulous, amoral. There's no charity. There's no give. There's no brotherhood. There's no semblance of treat others the way you want to be treated. Treat others as though they were yourself. Treat them like they're your brother. There's no aspect of that. You go against their bottom line and they go for the jugular. You're not even worth $50 million. You don't even understand the contract. We're offering you $50 million. I thought we were your friend. Well, you're a bitch. People are accusing you of misconduct in the workplace. You're not a self-made man. You've always worked for somebody else. Really? These people are dirtbags. I'm glad this is happening, because now people are seeing this is who they really are. They're not good people. They're not even trying to be good people. They don't even know what it is to be a good person because they're Jewish, because they don't believe in Jesus Christ. You can't know what it is to be a good person. You can't be a good person if your heart isn't open to Jesus Christ. And that is not the case with these people. Obviously.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does he talk like that about every group that doesn't worship Jesus Christ? Does he talk like that comparably about Muslims and atheists and Buddhists and anybody who just isn't a Christian? I'm betting that he doesn't.
He believes that only he is very overtly Christian and this weird version of Catholicism that he seems to practice, or what, he is very open about you have to have God in your life in order to have this. But no, I have never heard him talk about Buddhists or even Muslims. You would expect an anti-Islam, like hatred to manifest itself, and you would expect that. But that's sort of like the old school racism, that's the George W. Bush era, racism is complaining about terror attacks or whatever. In fact, most of these guys, and I could probably find you a clip of Fuentes saying something like this, respect Islam, or they respect Muslims, quote unquote, because in their societies they actually treat women the way they're supposed to be treated, and you get a whole lot of that in these kinds of circles, so
which of course is not true. Muslims as an all-inclusive group do not do that at all. They're talking, and of course it makes sense because they have a great deal of affinity with the people that run extreme reactionary Islamist societies, because they are essentially in their own way far right authoritarian religious types. They're the same type, so of course they feel kinship with them. But it's obviously not about not having Jesus in your life. It's about them being Jewish, and they hate Jews, and this thing about they're mean and they're nasty and they don't have charity, all these things that obviously niceness and charity and kindness, all the things that we'd most associate with that gruesome little ghoul Nick Fuentes. They don't have that, and the only reason is that they don't accept you. No. It's because they're Jews. We all know it. We all know that, and even if you believe this stuff you're saying, it's a post facto rationalization at best.
Right, exactly, and ultimately it revolves around this sort of like this. They see like the media power elite, right? They see these media structures, and they noticing is always the term that they use. They notice that, a whole bunch of the people that are not letting them say terrible things about Israel or about the Jews are themselves have these kinds of last names, and therefore ... This is the thing. This shows you the power that they have, et cetera, and not looking at sort of the overarching structure of the way that the advertising revenues work, et cetera. I guarantee you, if Jeremy Boring could get advertisers on an openly anti-Semitic program, they would absolutely hire Nazis to be on their channels. This isn't a it's just I hate to put it that way. But it's not, they're not saying you're not allowed to talk about this because we're the secret elite. It's because we don't want to scare away advertisers, and because you're making things a little bit too obvious by spewing literal Nazi rhetoric. We like to file the serial numbers off of our Nazi rhetoric here. We like to demonize trans people. That's much more acceptable form of bigotry. Because people don't think about gas chambers when they think about being bigoted towards trans people. Again, I hate that I'm laughing about this, but it's just so absurd. It's absurd on every possible level, and I hate that I even have to explain this in so many words. But this is what's happening in this situation. There's just no way around it. All right, we're in the home stretch. Okay. We're getting there. How you doing right now, Jack? How you feeling?
Well, it's always nice talking to you, Daniel, because we always have such fun talking about these light and happy things. You always restore my faith in human life and things like that, in the future, and the essential goodness of the human soul. So it's great.
Great. I'm glad you're doing great, because segue alert. We are now going to be playing a brief clip from a podcast that we have talked about previously, Friends of Nick Fuentes, another kind of up-and-coming independent production. I'm doing great. We might do a couple of these people, we might do full episodes on, kind of, we've been talking, or I've been thinking about kind of doing prepping some shorter episodes about some of these more minor figures, just kind of getting them out there, because I do find some fascinating shit in here, but they're not quite, there's not quite enough material for a full episode all the time. But this is the show. I'm doing great. And this just is an illustration of the way that this anti-Semitism is bubbling up from from the talent and from the audience. This is just a signal of what these people think is perfectly acceptable to say in public. So this is a short clip. It's only about 59 seconds, but they're talking about like some Twitter drama that they got into around trans people and sort of the drag queen story hour stuff. And the title of this episode is actually Do LGBT Kids Exist? And because the whole thing that that kind of comes up with the drag queen story hour is, well, kids, there are queer kids that exist who will be discovering their sexuality at the same age that everybody else discovers their sexuality. They will discover it young, and being exposed to the idea that these sorts of things exist is actually a way of like making them feel comfortable with the adults that they will hopefully become in just a few years. And so, like, yes, queer kids exist, and they should be allowed to have access to materials that reflect their feelings, right? And then the answer to this is like, well, gay kids don't exist because straight kids, nobody has any sexuality until they're of age, of course, which is completely absurd. Like, I would love to actually like drill down into the details on exactly when they think like sexuality. Like, when did you first having sexual feelings? How did you know you were straight? Et cetera, et cetera. So this is just a clip from that little thing, and they're getting into this, like, they got into this like Twitter debate with this guy with a sort of a makeup influencer, a gay male makeup influencer whose Twitter handle is Matt XIV, or so Matt 14, and this is a lot. So hold on.
Right. And you're not only sexualizing kids, but you're tossing them into this progressive umbrella of LGBT community that is very sexually inappropriate.
Yeah. So a very popular gay guy on Instagram saw this. His name is Maddox V. I'm assuming it's Matt. What is it? 14? Guess it's the age of guys he likes. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, none of this is.
That is some vile shit right there. That is some vile shit. I just I did look this up. It took me a little bit to find this because I didn't know this guy before. I didn't know Matt 14 before, listen to this clip. But I was curious, like it turns out that like Matt 14, Matt Bernstein, Matt Bernstein is his name. He is now 21, and he started his Instagram account when he was 14, which reminds you that Instagram has been around for 7 years, which of course it has, but it just tells me what an old man I am, that I still think of Instagram as like the up and coming newbie of the, and it's like, oh no, it's been around for at least 7 years. It's like, oh right. Yeah, no, that's the thing. So that's why his handle is Matt 14. It's always been Matt 14 because like a lot of these guys, they start these things when they're kids, and then they just kind of keep it up, and then they become influencers, and that's just the handle they go by because that's the handle they've always gone by. This is not some subtle coded reference to wanting to fuck 14-year-olds. I mean, just it's just the slimiest thing, right? It's just the slimiest fucking thing to just like slide that in there like that. Like, I find it like, I shouldn't be, I mean, it's not that I'm offended by this because obviously I've seen worse and obviously I don't expect any better, but it's just like the level of like, of just like going, maybe it's the age of guys he likes or something. And it's like, just fuck you. I mean, it's just, why even go there? It could have been Matthew 14. It could have been a biblical reference for all he knew, right? I mean, you know, Matthew 14 is a famous chapter. I actually, that was my immediate thought, was it's probably a reference to Matthew 14. It's not, but it could have been a reference to Matthew 14. Like, anyway, we're not even to the bad part of this clip yet. When the implications of pedophilic rape are not the bad parts of the clip, that's just standard operating procedure for these guys these days.
It's all speculation, right? I'm not making any sort of accusations or anything like that for legal purposes, but I mean, he's a he-they, which means that he's a he. He's a singular person. He's not two people, but he's a friendly queer Jew.
Mm.
I mean, describe yourself in 3 words and then have somebody think of what that will look like.
Mm.
And it's a little like sound that Gina makes there. And they actually, in the video clip, they like cut to like close-ups of both of these guys, you know, sort of like making like, oh, interesting, fun, interesting. Oh, he's Jewish. Oh, that's interesting. We can't really say anything about that in person, but we're definitely going to imply certain things even more overtly than we just implied that this guy likes to fuck kids. You know, this is up on YouTube. This is free to watch. For all I know, it's monetized. I have no idea, but this is up on YouTube right now. I put a link to it in the show notes. It's right there. If you want to go and view the whole thing and tell yourself that I did not take this out of context. This is the up and coming crowd. This is what Steven Crowder wants to be able to do on his much, much more monetized, much, much more professional, much, much larger audience show. That's what's going on here. That's what's going on.
Yeah, and it's very, you know, I don't know about these people specifically, but I mean, and obviously Fuentes is ideologically anti-Semitic, no doubt about that whatsoever. A hell of a lot of these people, though, I feel like there isn't really theory here or ideology in that sense. You know, there's anti-Semitism. Don't get me wrong. I'm not denying the anti-Semitism. It is larded on thick. It is omnipresent, and it's disgusting. But it's not ideological anti-Semitism in the same way as you were talking about the what's his name? The
Kevin McDonald,
guy that wrote the
right?
book. Kevin McDonald. Yeah, it's not, you know, like in classical fascism, right? There were Nazi Party quote unquote intellectuals who wrote books about why anti-Semitism was right and why the Jews were like this and why the Jews were like that and stuff like that. I can't help feeling, you know, dreading that the next time these people are packing the cattle trucks, you know, a hell of a lot of them are not going to be doing it from even any sort of actual ideological conviction about Jewish people. I mean, you know, it doesn't make it better. Again, don't misunderstand me. But when they do it next time, they're going to be doing it for the same reason that it sounds like loads of these people are doing it when they make these sorts of remarks, which is that it's just a kind of code and a joke that you share between yourselves to establish your mutual identity and your mutual credentials, because it's something that, you know, the society you live in supposedly tells you you're not allowed to say. So you just pass it back and forth between each other like a Masonic handshake or something. You know, somebody says somebody's Jewish and you pull that face and you kind of go, and the person you're talking to does the same back to you, and you all know that you're on the same level and you're the same, you're in the same club, and you all know how funny you are, you know. And it's gonna, if it goes where it ultimately always goes, you know, they're going to be filling the camps on the basis of this mindless fucking joke identity thing that most of them don't even have an actual racist theoretical rationale behind it. They're just, you know, it's going to be from this rampant immaturity that seems to be everywhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is just so endemic to again endemic to these spaces, and these guys don't have to be, you know, these guys don't have to be intellectual Nazis. They don't have to be intellectual anti-Semites. They just have to follow the leader, as it were, you know. And it's and there is also this question of like how much the following the leader is ultimately a matter of like following the like the groupthink or following like the line of the day, because the other person that I wanted to highlight here is this I'm going to say woman. She is very young. She is, I think, like 24 or so. And her name is Isabelle Riley. She has been on, you know, Elijah Schaffer's show on a number of occasions. She has her own thing. I've been kind of low key working on like a full episode on her, especially in the last week or so. But this is part of it. This is again 36 seconds. It's very brief. This is part of one of her shows where she says, you know, satanic feminist says dead men can't rape, and so she plays clips of this musical artist who is kind of using like overtly feminist, kind of rad femme, not turfy, just, kind of radical feminist, ideology or, kind of imagery in her music. And, I don't have a dog in this fight. Of course, I'm more on her side than Isabelle Riley's side, but on her little, in part of her commentary, she starts talking about how women, what real women should be like. And this is a common thing with Isabelle Riley. And let's just play this.
Maybe stop preaching to young, impressionable women that empowerment is being a hoe and that telling guys they're not going to get with you, because not that women have the power, but women should have, the only power that women should really have is waiting until marriage and waiting for their forever husband to actually give their bodies to, because women never feel good about being whores. They just, they might lie to themselves in the world that they do, but they don't. They want a man to just be monogamous with, and as human beings, especially women, we are by nature monogamous. And if you're not, you're Jewish.
Jesus fucking Christ.
So the thing is that Isabelle Riley, she's actually, we're going to reveal this in the next clip. She recently got married to one of Elijah Schaffer's former producers, who looks like he's 12 years old. He's got to be in his like early 20s, but his name was Josiah Moody, so she now goes by Isabella Moody or Isabelle Riley Moody, depending. So she recently got married, but like I follow her on Twitter, and on the recent like little Patreon thing that we did with Ina, I talked about how like recently my Twitter has been. I suddenly start getting recommendations for a lot of kind of e-girls, just sort of and one of the ways that they drive engagement is by going like, oh, I really wish I was giving head right now, or oh, me or the PS5, and then they post like a picture of themselves with the video game console, and it's all very cute, and it's very like it's trying to get engagement, it's trying to get likes, it's trying to get people to respond like, oh, I would take you over time, baby, or whatever, that sort of thing. Well, Isabelle Riley is kind of that, but it's like if you've ever sucked a dick, you're a whore, and if you've ever eaten food, you're fat. That's a literal tweet, and she does this kind of thing all the time. It's just like it's pushing the same button, but it's pushing it from like the opposite side. Is like, if you show skin, then you're just a hoe, and if you're a hoe, then no man's ever going to want you, and women should just belong in the kitchen and that sort of thing. It is once you see the pattern, it is deeply, deeply hilarious just how much like she wants you to have that kind of like instant rage. Like she wants you to tweet about her. She wants us to talk about her. But
yeah. Well, it worked. It worked on me. If that was the reaction she wanted, she got it.
She got it for sure. For sure. To give you a hint of kind of who Isabelle Riley is, and to give you sort of a little bit of background.
I've got a pretty clear idea already, actually.
Well, again, as I've been prepping this episode, like more and more of her has come out, and like she kind of overtly was doing like a Heil Hitler thing. She went on this guy Dalton Clodfelter's podcast. Dalton Clodfelter, first of all, what a fucking name. He's sort of the big guy who's going around to Florida universities doing the Ye is right routine, where it's like Ye is right, prove me wrong. Again, stealing the bit from Steven Crowder, but like making it a more overtly anti-Semitic, right? And Isabelle Riley
horning in on Stephen's intellectual property.
Yeah,
you see, Stephen could be monetizing that himself. He could be doing that himself.
he could be the one doing the overt anti-Semitism.
Exactly.
Dalton Clodfelter is a
he had Alex Jones on his show immediately after Alex Jones had Ye on his show to let Alex Jones, who is as good as a fucking Nazi anyway, justify having Ye on his show. So the distance here is already like as thin as a fucking pube.
And she goes on his show. And at the end of it, kind of does the ironic, like, Heil Hitler, he, he. And I didn't include that clip here, but I had already another clip from this, like, space with this guy, John Doyle. John Doyle, again, personal friend with Elijah Schaffer. He has, I don't think he worked for the Blaze currently, but he's been on the Blaze, and sort of everyone who's been on the Blaze like signs NDAs for certain shit, and, so I did eventually find like kind of a longer recording of this clip, but in this clip, it's sort of like in the next clip, not the one we're about to listen, but it's John Doyle sort of talking about his differences with the America First movement and with Nick Fuentes, right? But earlier in the Twitter space, Isabelle Riley was just hanging out. And I thought it was worth playing this little bit just to get a sense of like who Isabelle Riley is and how these guys think of her.
Event. One of the platforms just opened up, and it's like 7 p.m. It's peak hours of the gym. I gotta go. Okay, see ya.
Yeah. On that note, as well, I've been up since 5 a.m. Got a show tomorrow. Go watch it.
Oh wow! What a
p.m.
disappointment.
Eastern, but what?
What a disappointment.
I told you I don't know if I could do it tonight, and then you put my name in the Twitter space title. We got to do these earlier. I literally wake up at 5 a.m. Your girl's got to get some ugly sleep going on.
Jeez.
I know. I know. And my husband's telling me I need to get off and make him a sandwich.
Listen to JD.
It's against my will. All right. Thank you. Really excited to be back. Thank you.
Go put extra meat on the sandwich. All right.
I do. I literally have to handle meat. It's disgusting, but I do it for my husband. Good night, everyone.
Oh my God. That's vile. Okay.
That's vile. That is. Oh my.
Hey, look. Josiah converted her to Christianity.
So true, so true.
Yeah, but like,
but Josiah doesn't go to church.
I mean, isn't that kind of like the Andrew Tate Islam conversion? Is it real though?
He doesn't go to church. He told me this.
What? Yes, he does, dude. I literally.
Dude, he literally says grace before meals. Like, what are you talking about?
No, I'm saying he said, we don't even go to church. We sit on the couch and talk to God.
What are you?
He's probably trolling you, dude.
Josiah is a little troll. I was with him
you should duel him
2 weeks ago, and everything that he asked of Isabella, she did instantly. He was like, "Hey, can I get some water, babe?" And then Isabella was like, "Warm or cold?" And it was so funny.
So I'm going to be honest. I don't know the names of everybody in that clip, and I couldn't identify all those voices for you. I knew Isabelle Riley. One of them is John Doyle. And one of them is this guy who calls himself Nuance Bro. All of these people will probably get little mini episodes at some point in the future, particularly Doyle. He's
right, okay.
He's his own thing. But this is the story of like, well, they all know Josiah. They all know Josiah Moody, who is, again, Isabelle Riley's new husband. These people all kind of hang out together. They're all friends, Josiah still has a job working behind the scenes is like a producer on the Blaze, doing kind of like pushing buttons behind the scenes, doing the live shows and such, and is apparently an up and coming kind of person in that industry. And his wife is a fucking Nazi hanging out with Nazis, and these are all very friendly people. And it tells you like, there is no sort of ideological disagreement here. This is all built around, what we are and are not kind of allowed to say, what we are comfortable saying in public, right? But I did think it was interesting to kind of see that, like, she's just hanging out with these guys, and then like, well, you put my name in the space, and now I can't be here because I got to get up in the morning and make my own horrifyingly racist show. God, there's definitely an Isabelle Riley episode coming up very soon. It's going to be very funny if the first woman who gets like a full, episode of, I guess we did Lauren Southern, but it's going to be very funny if she becomes like the first person to be like, let's talk about Isabelle Riley because she is so deeply disinteresting, but like in a fascinating way. Anyway. And this is where we're going to finish off today. There's one more clip, and it's from later in that same Twitter space. And again, these guys really let it hang out in these Twitter spaces as if they don't think they can be recorded. These guys who all have like media savvy, who all produce their own shows or mostly produce their own shows, mostly doing live streaming, who understand how OBS works and screen recorders work, think that it's completely possible that anybody could be recording this and posting it to places where people like me can find them. It's hilarious.
Well, it's interesting to me because they either do think that, in which case they're incredibly stupid. I mean, obviously they are incredibly stupid on politics, but you'd have to be very, very silly not to realize that nothing you say on the internet is ever really private or lost, not necessarily so, or really just the dance they do on the sort of public facing shows. It really is just a performance. It's not even about, it's not about any kind of plausible deniability. Because I was just going to say the actual stuff where they, as you say, they let it all hang out. It's not hard to find. It's not really hidden. You don't have to go on the dark web. It's right there, but it's like this game of decorum that they have to play in certain venues. That's really all it is.
Yeah, it's like don't say it where Glenn Beck can hear you, basically. All right. Don't play it where Media Matters is gonna put it on their page, and maybe.
Yeah. And that's really that's only for Glenn Beck's PR anyway.
Right,
Glenn Beck isn't going to be ideologically offended by any of this.
First off, I want to say, John, congratulations on getting your Twitter back. So I wanted to ask. This is kind of for everybody, but I guess mainly specifically John. So it seems like, especially at this point with the media and whatnot, Nick Fuentes and America First, teaming up with Ye, it seems like Nick is our type of ideology's best path into the mainstream. So do we think that it's good to just put aside our personal differences with him and accept that we need everybody we can get into this movement?
I think the premise of your question is actually perfectly inverted, because I'm not the one who instigates these type of conflicts. If you're familiar with Nick's show at all, he's been taking consistent shots at me for years, and I've never reciprocated. I've always been very friendly towards him. I've done favors for him behind the scenes, helped him in any way I can. And then recently things have sort of escalated, I think, because there's a character named Beardson Beardley who was behaving ridiculously on a live stream, and my good friend Nathaniel Abbott accurately described his behavior, which prompted Beardson to do like a 3-hour stream viciously attacking him. And then I hopped into one of these A-log streams and I, told these guys I would put up like $10,000 if they fought or something, which amounted effectively to a declaration of war. And, it is what it is. And I tried to diffuse it because, look, I guess took a shot at Beardson, so I DM him and I'm like, hey man, just wanted to be straight up with you, blah, blah, blah. If that's being a pussy or whatever, so be it. But then Beardson wanted to go after me. And so the problem is, it's like AF's greatest export at this point is basically drama. And I'm tired of it. Everybody else behind the scenes is pretty much tired of it. All of their allies, whether it's Jake Lloyd, Patrick Casey, Jaden McNeil, I mean, all the guys behind the scenes you don't even know. Like, you can literally view it as all of these people are just spiteful and and like, you guys are the ones who are correct, or you can think that maybe there's something to be said about, like, I don't know, there's just 109 people just were done with them for whatever reason. So I completely agre that if you want these ideas
to be... That's an oddly specific, you're definitely not referencing...
Relax. My point is simply, I've been of the opinion forever that if you want these ideas to be mainstream, then you need people in the mainstream talking about them. And for this approach, I was called a Zio-shill cuck, et cetera, by these people. And
so first of all, the 109 meme is obviously a reference to the very prominent online meme of, the number of countries the Jews have been kicked out of. And so by using that to reference Nick Fuentes, is that 109 people don't like the American First people, he's effectively calling Nick Fuentes a Jew. He's saying Nick Fuentes is acting like a Jew in their parlance. That's what he's saying. Mm-hmm. And when his buddy there goes, that's a very specific number, it's like, relax, buddy, relax. We all know what I'm saying. We all know the reference I'm making. Don't even go there. Don't make a thing out of it. Also, John Doyle there is referencing like people who were like deep inside of like sort of the Nick Fuentes phenomenon going back to like 2017, 2018, like Beardson Beardley, this is somebody who's been like a long-term commenter who became like a regular like contributor to America First and to Cozy TV. Like these are like, this is like a long-term, like you don't have to know a lot about like, Nick Fuentes to kind of know these people, but he's referencing Jane McNeil, Patrick Casey. These are overtly anti-Semitic, overtly like alt-right figures. Like that is, there's no question who go back years and years and years, who go back to Patrick Casey, I believe he attended Unite the Right. Like, he's representing these people as, sort of obvious figures that are like prominent within this thing. And the whole question he's being asked there is like, is the Groyper movement, is Nick Fuentes sort of like the best hope for getting our ideas into the mainstream? And note that John Doyle doesn't say, well, I disagree with Nick on certain things and I don't actually like believe in all the things that it's like. He answers the question as a question of optics and as a question of like the toxicity, the personal toxicity that Nick Fuentes has for the people around him, and not like actually disagreeing with the merits of Nick Fuentes' various political and personal positions, right?
Oh, so, yeah.
Like, the casualness with which they sort of discuss this issue, the casualness with which these things are just like stated, and the fact that these are people who have, like, John Doyle is not a major name on the Blaze or on the Daily Wire. But he is up and coming. And these are the kinds of people, this is the talent pool that these media organizations are pulling from right now. And this is,
loosely speaking,
this is the water in which all of these people swim now. This kind of overt anti-Semitism, this is going to be like completely mainstream in a couple of years at the outside. Like, that is pretty obvious at this point. Like, they're just going to be talking about this because they're just going to have to, and that's the world we live in. What was being said on the Daily Show and by Andrew Anglin and by Richard Spencer, even to a lesser degree. I mean, Richard Spencer was barely this overt in his anti-Semitism as John Doyle was just then, as Isabelle Riley was just then. I mean, he was anti-Semitic. He is anti-Semitic. Do not think I'm defending Richard Spencer, but like, Richard Spencer is basically like, his ideas are now with just mainstream within 22-year-old, 24-year-old, up and coming political pundits, political activists, on these.
Yeah. He walked so they could run.
Yeah, exactly. And, he got punched in the face that one time. So clearly nobody pays attention. He lost.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the
problem solved.
Problem solved. Got punched in the face. That's all it took, apparently. No. Yeah. So this is a depressing one, but I think worth talking about. And don't worry, we are going to be talking more about these issues in future episodes, because you would not believe the amount of material I had that I could have thrown into this. I kind of threw like a handful of clips in here. Oh my God. It was just, once I started looking for, like these guys going onto sort of mainstreamish platforms and talking and using the word Jew as a derogatory term, like just as a generic derogatory, it was fucking everywhere. And it really, really is. It really, really is, a lot of times you see, it's like either, well, I'm Jewish, and so therefore, I can't be anti-Semitic, or, they call me a Jew, and I'm like, well, I'm not a Jew. I'm not, accepting the premise, right? Accepting the premise. And that's just where it goes. I mean, the overt thing that they're doing kind of in public right now is the anti-trans bigotry, but expect the anti-Semitism to come. Like, it's coming down the pike, and it's coming very quickly down the pike, for sure.
I looked up Matthew 14. Actually, it is, as you say, is a famous chapter. It's the feeds the 5,000 and walks on the water chapter. It's the first time those stories are told in the New Testament, because Matthew is the first of the four Gospels in the New Testament. Anyway, but I found something I liked in the following chapter. Actually, 15. It would have been convenient if it had been in 14. That would have been neat, but it wasn't. It was in 15. Thanks, the Bible. But I like this in Matthew 15, where Jesus is having an argument with the Pharisees. And he says, what goes into a man's mouth does not make him unclean, but what comes out of his mouth, that is what makes him unclean. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, no.
I think a hell of a lot of stuff comes out of a hell of a lot of mouths now that makes the people that say it unclean.
I cannot think of a better way to end this episode.
That was I Don't Speak German, Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show or found it useful, please spread the word. If you want to contact me, I'm @_Jack_Graham_. Daniel is @Daniel E. Harper, and the show's Twitter is @IDSGpod. If you want to help us make the show and stay 100% editorially independent, we both have Patreons. I Don't Speak German is hosted at idon'tspeakgerman.libsyn.com, and we're also on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, and we show up in all podcast apps. This show is associated with Eruditorum Press, where you can find more details about it. The music was by Loon the Band.